Hey, Chris.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the West Goshen Township Board of Supervisors meeting for Tuesday, August the 15th. To start the meeting, will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be aware this meeting is being live streamed on the Township YouTube channel, and also the meeting may be audio or video recorded by people present in the room. This evening, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, I sadly regret to announce the passing of Dave Woodward, Director of Public Works for the Township, on July the 28th. Our sincere condolences to Dave's family, and our thoughts and prayers are with them at this difficult time. Dave was born and raised in Westchester, graduating from East High School. He was an employee of the township for 23 years in total across 2 periods of time, serving his community as a member of the Public Works team. He was a friend and colleague to many, and he will be greatly missed by everyone. Okay, so the first item of business is public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to raise an issue that is not on the agenda tonight, or who has a question or comment for the board or staff? Very good. We'll proceed to the first agenda item, which is number 4. First business item, which is discussion and possible approval of resolution number 19, 2023, granting final subdivision approval for a lot consolidation plan for 1205 Ward Avenue, Brandywine Regional Airport. Chris, do you have an update for us on this? I know it came before the board not too recently for a decision on waiving the, or rather granting a preliminary final subdivision approach.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So the plan that's before the board is for final approval. This is a lot line change for the Brandywine Airport at 1205 Ward Avenue. Is there a representative from Howell Engineering here this evening? Thank you. So we do have the plans up on the screen this evening. If you'd like to kind of go through what's being proposed. Sure.
First of all, my name is Keith Rupp. I'm with Howell Engineering. So I can present this plan here. What we have is a pretty typical lot line change. All we're doing is we are taking about a 20-foot buffer from the two QVC properties that sit to the north of the Brandywine Regional Airport lots, and we are then transferring that land over to the Brandywine Regional Airport, and then we are consolidating all into one just to keep it nice and clean.
Okay, so I have a question. There's a parcel of land that I believe is owned by the, I don't know what the actual company's called, Westchester Senior Properties. There's no, that piece of property is not affected by what you're doing. There's no transfer of land from that.
No, sir.
Okay, so this additional buffer on the north side of the runway is only going to be partial because that property isn't affected by this lot line change, correct?
And I can confirm really quick, but no. So the QVC lots do line up with both the retirement home and then also the airport properties. So the line will run fully across. If that's what you're asking, yes.
Yes.
And again, the airport currently operates under easements there. So the whole idea is to just take the property line off of the runway, because if you see it, the property line is pretty much right up against the runway there. So it's to give them a little bit more space.
So the actual lot configuration when you consolidate is going to be kind of quite unique, right? You're going to have two parcels and then a sliver of land over the top of the property that's where this senior.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification. Does the board have any other questions or comments regarding this?
Yeah, I just have one. On the resolution itself, on the second paragraph from the end, we need to change that at its meeting on August 8th, 2023, the Township Planning Commission recommended, because the July 11th one was canceled, so it's the August 8th is the one that we made the recommendation. And that goes for the next two other items too as well.
This is on page
1 of the resolution.
Page 1 of the resolution.
Yeah, it's just a change in the date. That's
That's
right.
my fault. I thought it was not the July meeting.
So it's August the 8th, John?
Yes, August 8th, 2015.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board?
Let's make a motion to approve.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve resolution number 19/2023, granting a final subdivision approval for this consolidation plan for 1205 Ward Avenue. Are there any board questions on the resolution, on the motion? Are there any public comments or questions on the motion? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You can keep a copy of this. The only thing that changes is that, and then just get it signed off for record.
Okay, next on the agenda is item number 5, discussion and possible approval of resolution number 20/2023, granting final subdivision and land development approval for the construction of a 13,000 square foot warehouse at 895 Fernhill Road. Chris, would you introduce this to the board, please?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So before the board this evening is consideration of final land development approval for a project at 895 Fernhill Road. As with the project on Ward Avenue, this previously came before the board for certain waivers from the Township subdivision and land development ordinance, which were granted. And I believe the applicant's design professional, Adam Brower from Edward Walsh and Associates, is here this evening to review the plan with the board.
Thanks, Chris. So, board, do you have any questions or comments on this resolution?
Oh, that's,
There it is.
oh, there it is.
Thank you.
Just that we have to change the date again.
Mr. Brown, you're going to just go over briefly what's happening with this land development?
Sure.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
It's a land development that we're in front of you for. We're, as you noted, a 13,000 square foot new building being proposed. There is an existing warehouse on the site, so this will be opposite that. We'll be utilizing the same access. The total parking being provided would be 41 spaces for both warehouse uses. And I guess I didn't mention a 2.2 acre site. We were in front of you, I think, 2 months or 3 months prior for a waiver for our one stormwater management system that sits up along the right of way. And we did, as was noted, have a favorable recommendation for approval from the Planning Commission, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have, but we would request that you consider approval.
Okay, thank you. Was there any discussion or issues that were raised at the Planning Commission meeting?
We certainly had discussion. We talked about parking, access to the buildings, things like that. I don't think there was anything, I don't want to speak for the Planning Commission, and they have representatives here. I don't think there was anything that was a concern to the Planning Commission, but we did discuss parking, for example.
Okay.
I think sidewalk came up. I think we talked about sidewalk when we were in front of the board previously as well.
Correct.
And also the issue about EV charging stations, whether or not there was going to be any included in this development, and you indicated there were not.
That's correct.
Did we talk about the building itself, roof, new building for solar?
We were not proposing that for this building.
Does anyone else from the board have a question? Mr. Brown? So I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 20, 2023.
Change of date.
The change of date. Thank you, John. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. So I have a motion and a second to approve resolution number 20, granting a final subdivision and land development approval for the construction of a 13,000 square foot warehouse at 895 Third Hill Road. Any board comments or questions on the motion? Any public comment or questions? Steve?
Going to take it to sidewalk are not included?
That's correct.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? Doug?
Just to include comment, the tree removal had started prior to approval, and Brian Kolakowski kind of explained it. May you please sort of reiterate the reasoning how that was allowed?
Yeah, Brian's not here tonight, unfortunately. I don't know if Chris or anyone else can comment on that.
There was some kind of permit approval.
They can remove trees prior to approval. They are allowed to clear trees.
Yeah, we actually got a separate grading permit that we had submitted to the township for review and approval, and that was issued.
Yeah, just curious.
Yep. Sure.
Any other questions from anyone attending? Okay, I'm ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much.
Okay, agenda item number 6 is discussion and possible approval of the conditional use decision and order for application number 1, 2023 for the construction of an assisted living facility, a mini warehouse self-storage facility in the C3 Limited Highway Commercial Zoning District at 943 South High Street. Krista, could you introduce us to the board?
So this is Branchport Capital LLC. They had filed a conditional use application. Property is 943 South High Street. There are 3 parcels in West Goshen and 1 parcel in West Town. The board held a public hearing on July 12th. The record was closed at the hearing. After the hearing, what's typically the case, especially if there was a party, in this case West Town Township, you have to prepare findings of fact, conclusions of law, and a proposed order. So I did that. The proposed order would approve the conditional use application. It would allow the development of a assisted living facility and also a mini warehouse self-storage facility. There are, I think, 21 conditions. Some are boilerplate, but this decision, as is typically, I shared with the applicant's counsel. Mr. Calagreco had provided some edits. Actually, the board members first provided me edits, but I've incorporated all of those. Mr. Calagreco provided me edits. There were only 2 that I didn't feel comfortable making. They have since backed off the request to amend condition 11. So condition 11 will remain as it was drafted in the order that the board has seen. And they have proposed a slight modification of condition 16. So condition 16 requires the applicant to develop a construction management plan to coordinate access and deliveries by construction vehicles. The plan will require that the access and deliveries by construction vehicles occur during off-peak hours for traffic traveling on Route 202. And the plan has to be approved by both West Goshen and West Town because the entrance to Stanton Avenue is actually located in West Town Township. What the applicant has asked us to add is in parentheses that the restriction for deliveries will not apply to pickup trucks and passenger cars. So that's the one change that they have requested to that condition, which I think is reasonable. Obviously, that's for the board. So happy to go over the applicant. Like I said, accepted all the conditions that were proposed, all the changed conditions that the board members provided to me. And I think they're satisfied with the order. I think the board hopefully is satisfied, but I can answer any questions anyone has.
Thank you, Kristen. Does the board have any questions at this time?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about some of the proposed language here, item 11, page 16. And that has to do with solar panel installation on the rooftop. I mean, there's a lot of legalese that's being thrown in here.
Well, John, they're not the suggested change. They've backed off that. They're not. They don't want that. They're willing to not accept that new language. So the decision, the condition will remain as it was, as I drafted it, which is much more simplistic.
Okay, and where is that language?
That is in, so I printed out a new copy of everything this afternoon, and that is in front of the board.
So we turn to page 17. It says, during land development, applicant shall investigate if the roof structure of the assisted living facility and self-storage facility can support solar panels. If the proposed architectural design of the buildings can be designed to support the installation of solar panels, applicant shall design the roof structure to accommodate such installation.
Okay, that's a little bit better than what proposed. Okay, that's good. Because what we're looking for is to have solar panels installed, if they can be. We're not mandating it, but we're looking for it to happen.
Right, and they understand that.
Any other board questions? I have a couple of questions, and one's a clarification, I believe, Kristen. So, number 17. Applicant shall use the existing emergency access driveway from South Walnut Street. Do we really mean the access gate location and not the actual existing?
Well, so I was confused myself, and I asked Mr. Colorgraper to clarify that. There is an emergency access driveway that from South Walnut Street leads onto this property. And that is where they're proposing to keep it as it is, but then it will extend into the property. If you can remember the plan, that's sort of like, there's a driveway area. So the emergency access, which is currently there, they're not proposing to change that at all. They're going to extend it then through the property to be able to then get out through the driveways in front of the buildings.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. This, I believe, is again what we agreed to. I just want to have it included if we can, just to make sure there's no ambiguity down the road. So on number 18, applicant shall install the necessary electrical infrastructure sufficient to power 6 electric vehicle dual charging stations. I believe the intent was to have level 2 charging stations. So not just a 110 volt circuit, but just a level 2 dual charging station, just for clarification purposes. Is that acceptable? Yeah. Okay.
So before charging stations, you wanted to say level 2?
After dual and before charging, dual level 2 charging station.
And when you're referring to those charging stations, do you use the number 2 or do you use Roman numeral 2?
It's the number 2.
Okay, just not familiar enough with that.
And I have one question related to the change in language relative to the construction. What do we mean by off-peak versus peak in terms of hours, just for understanding?
I think peak is typically 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. 7 to 9 a.m. and 4 to 6 p.m. I'm happy to put that in there, if that's acceptable with you.
Okay. I have no other questions. Does the board have any other questions?
I just have one. Since on the findings of fact on number 25, since we added that language in there with the exception of dying disease and scrub vegetation, I'm assuming that also that must be cleared and removed and properly disposed of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's their intention.
I would assume so too.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Any other questions? Okay, so we have two changes, Kristen, to the language that I believe were acceptable. One was to insert the level 2, and the other was to insert what we mean by peak and off-peak hours.
Correct. And also, yes.
Yeah. So with those changes assumed to be incorporated, is there someone who will make a motion to approve the conditional use decision in order for application number 1, 2023?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Tina. Is there a second? Thank you, Ashley. So a motion to approve the conditional use decision in order for application number 1. Are there any board questions on the motion? Are there any public comments or questions on the motion? Okay, then we're ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Next on the agenda is item number 7, discussion regarding the status of construction for the Woodlands at Greystone development. Mr. Colagreco, Mr. Reiser.
Thank you. We were asked to appear before the board just to give maybe we do this annually, I don't know, but a periodic update on the construction activities at Greystone. Specifically, Chris sent us a memo and identified 5 bullet points that he thought the board would like an update on. Bill Reister here, as you know, is the developer. Bill's not the home builder. So if there's any questions about the construction of the homes, he probably can't answer them, but he is the developer of the property and he's the home builder. The first question was the status of home construction throughout the development. Bill?
Yeah, we don't track the closings of homes. We track the closing of lots, and we have closed with Envy Homes 356 of the 588, which leaves you 232 left to close.
And they're essentially, I mean, the board probably sees this plan periodically, but they're essentially, what, 5 or 6 phases of proposed development?
There's 6 phases. Phases 1, 2, and 3 are basically fully built out. There might be a few lots in each of the phases, either related to parking lots for models, or maybe one lot that's not sold in phase 3. Phase 4 is fully developed, except for sidewalks and street trees and final paving. There's 105 lots in that phase, and we are currently selling lots there, and Envy is building homes in that phase. Phase 5, which I think you'll see hopefully in front of you next month for subdivision approval so we can record the lots, is under construction, and we expect to pave those lots in probably mid-September. There are 107 lots in that phase. And each of 4 and 5 consist of 4 different product types.
If the economy, and that's a big if, but if you had a crystal ball and things stayed the way relatively that they are today, when do you think that at least the lot development will be completed at Greystone? When will you have delivered all of the lots?
I think we're probably slightly over 2 years to sell all the lots. We're probably, I'd say, the end of next summer to finish the subdivision development. Phase 6 has 75 lots, so it's a little bit smaller. We should start the development of that in the spring of 2024.
The second bullet point was the status of the completion of the necessary infrastructure, and this sort of goes hand in hand with your answer to the first question. I will say, the board may or may not be aware of this, but we've started the process by giving the township notice that we are ready and we are completed the public improvements in phase one. If you go back to 2019, when the financial security was posted, at that time the developer was required to post security for the park, soon-to-be park, Aram Avenue, Serpentine Barrens, all of the, quote, public improvements associated with that phase of development. I think the bond was something like $5 or $6 million. The township has already released maybe $3.5 or $3.8 million of that. So we would like the remainder of that to be released, and of course that will be based on an inspection and punch list and all of that, which we'd like to get started in the fall. As for the rest of the infrastructure, I think most of it is private for the subsequent phases. I'm drawing a blank on whether there's any additional public infrastructure to be done in the remaining stages.
Define public infrastructure.
Somebody dedicated.
The subdivision, when we subdivide the lots, the single-family detached lots, other than the active adult, will all become public streets. So we'll be looking to dedicate those to the township at the time when all the improvements are done and the homes are built.
The third bullet point had to do with the construction of the trail network in the future park. That, as I explained in my letter to the township, is done. The trails are completed in the future park. Well, we think they're completed, and I guess that will be subject to, review and punch list and all of that, which hopefully the township will get to over the next, 30 days. But the trails, and in fact, all of the park improvements are done. We're ready for inspection. Just to clarify that. The fourth bullet point was the restoration of the Serpentine Barrens. There's about 45 acres on this property, give or take, which the board is familiar with. They look like rock outcroppings, but they're called Serpentine Barrens. You can see them from 322. They are, when the plan was originally approved back in 2013 or 2012, there was a plan submitted for restoration of those barrens. Apparently these barrens are supposed to not have invasive growth, trees, and all the things that these barrens have accumulated over the years. The plan was to do away with the invasives, to scrape the property, and to make the barrens suitable for there's certain kinds of flowers and everything to grow in the barrens once these invasives are stripped away. We've actually accelerated that schedule. DCNR is aware of that stuff, acceleration, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources. They've sent a confirming email that we're on schedule, they're aware, and they think it's good work that's been done. Right now, that is ready for inspection, that is ready for dedication. That was supposed to be, those acres are supposed to be turned over to West Goshen Township. Future maintenance, and I'm paraphrasing here because we don't have our consultants here, but future maintenance will involve probably some sort of weeding regime twice a year of the barrens, either through small isolated burns or pesticides, and either one is suitable according to DCNR. But right now, the only thing going on out there, I guess, is they're just finishing up some grass.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody knew anything about barrens. I certainly didn't until I got to this project. They're really rock outcroppings and certain, I'll call it wheat growths, that are conducive to butterflies primarily. I'm sure amongst other environmental things. But and as Lou said, this property, which is shown in purple on that plan, I think it's 30-some acres, but only 10 acres of that area of purple is actually barrens. The plan that was approved required to remove the invasive trees. There were some of those that were needed to be done, to remove invasive weeds and plant growth, and to scrape soil off some of the rock in order to allow butterflies to get to the rock, I guess. We have done all of that work, and to kind of clarify what we believe we accomplished here is we're restoring the barrens to what they used to be back when, or they should be environmentally. We are currently putting the last bit of specific seeds down that defines it as barrens. That should be done this week, early next week. Keep getting rained out every other day. So, and that we believe will be complete what the developer's responsibilities are. Subject to that, and going forward, as the town takes dedication, there is an ongoing maintenance of the barrens to make sure that these invasive trees and invasive weeds don't come back in. And basically what that means is you can spray it with something that will kill the weeds or the tree growth. Hopefully that's a little helpful.
And the final bullet point that Chris asked us to address, that I think we've already touched on, and that is the status of the park and the status of Aram Avenue. We were going to dedicate, you may recall, Aram Avenue last school year, the start of the school year. That didn't happen. But a punch list was generated back then, and the biggest item on the punch list was some sort of drainage issue at Aram and 29 Phoenixville Public Ring. That's been fixed.
No, it's the roundabout. It's
The first roundabout coming off,
correct.
Okay.
which has been done.
That's been done. But again, I suspect as we go through the punch list examination of Aram, there'll be some other repairs that will have to be made. As far as we're concerned, Aram Avenue has been ready for dedication ever since that repair was made to the roundabout. We didn't push for it at that time.
I mean, I think last year, probably over a year ago, we were hopeful that it would be dedicated. The town decided they didn't want to take dedication at that time, and they had justification for that. So we at that point, we had a punch list. We had done parts. We completed part of the punch list until the town was really ready to take dedication. Wasn't any sense in fixing curbs and whatnot when we'd have to go back out and do it again. So where we are at this point is hopeful that the township will be in a place to take dedication. The road is complete, the traffic lights on each end are complete, and we have asked via our 30-day letter to get another punch list that we'll take care of.
So that's it. I mean, we can answer any questions you might have if we haven't touched on them. But the weather's been a little bit challenging completing some of this stuff over the summer. But as I said, we're ready to have and a reminder, of course, I'm sure the township is aware of this, but concurrent with the dedication of the improvements, there's a maintenance bond posted with the township to ensure 15% of the cost of the bond, to ensure that after you own it, at least for 18 months, it's going to work the way it's designed to work. It's been designed to work. So that's it. That's the update. The August 2023 update of Greystone.
Okay. Well, thank you both. I appreciate that. So maybe what we can do is take these 5 items one at a time and just see if there's clarification questions from the board and invite anyone attending to ask questions as well. So let me try to kick it off with the first one, which was about the status of the overall development. I think I heard that you believe there's about 2 more years to go from now to sell all the lots, but then you also said something about by the end of next summer you'll be complete. So I was a little confused as to what that meant. Can you just reiterate the schedule here?
We sell lots to MD Homes on a quarterly basis. So we develop a phase on the front, and then they purchase the lots over. So phase 4, as an example, has 105 lots in it. So they will buy those lots over a 1-year period. Same thing with phase 5. It takes about 1 year for them to absorb those lots. In phase 6, it'll take probably less than a year since there's 75 lots in that.
Okay, so basically you're selling lots now for phase 4 to NB Homes. Another year from now you'll be in phase 5, and another year after that you'll be finishing up the final lots in phase 6. Is that right?
I would say this fall NB will be beginning to sell homes in phase 5.
Phase 5, okay.
Well, I just have a question there. I mean, that's in a perfect world, is it? Or, I mean, given this environment, rising interest rates and the housing market having slowed, do you think that your timeline may be somewhat Optimistic?
Well, if you're not an optimist in my business, you shouldn't be in it. So I think it's reasonable. They've been selling at the rate of 9 or 10 a month, which, when you look at that over a 1-year period, it's about 100 to 120 homes a year. So when you look at what's left, they should be able to buy all the lots within a couple-year period.
Yeah.
Is there a chance that will extend? Yeah, certainly.
So the 232 includes all phases, including 6. It's left.
Yes.
To sell.
Yes.
Any other questions related to the status of the construction, the phasing, or the timeline from the board? We'll go to the other questions in a minute. So just kind of, okay. Is there anyone who's attending who would like to ask a question about the overall status of development? We will get to other questions related to infrastructure in the park system in a minute, but just try to close out this, where they are with the overall schedule and development. Doug, you have a question?
Well, may I please ask you 2 specific questions about Gershwin, which is part of Phase 4? And the first question is where are the propane tanks? Are they on the lots or are they away from the lots?
I think Gershwin is in an active adult area. Forgive me for not knowing.
It's the largest state houses.
Oh, okay. They will be on lot.
On lot.
Yes.
Okay. I'm curious because I live right there. I didn't see any tanks go in. I just saw the basements go in, but okay. The next question is the landscape plan, is that supposed to be done concurrently as the homes are going up, or is that going to be all completed after all the homes are done?
The landscaping that is part of the land development plans are for the most part street trees. And those will go in as the homes are developed. There may be some street trees within open space areas between a lot or an area like that, which is our the developer's responsibility, and that will probably put in, relatively soon.
Relatively soon, while the phase is okay.
Yeah, while the house construction is under construction, we'll probably put trees in the open space.
Okay, thank you.
Are any other questions related to the schedule, the development plan, the duration? Yes, ma'am.
Carol Bourrier, I live in the Woodlands. Bill, if you could just clarify the timeline, because what we're being told is basically we're looking at 2026 for the transition based on the economics of scale, what's going on right now with the selling, the transition between yourselves and MDR, selling approximately 4 homes per month. With this year, we had 3 months that homes didn't sell, so that was a further delay in the timeline. Can you clarify specifically for the Woodlands when we're doing a transition?
Yeah, I'll do my best there.
Can I interrupt 1 second? You mean transition to the homeowners association, correct?
It's basically for the dedication.
Right.
Yes.
Well, no, there's 2 different things. So there's dedication of public improvements to the township, and there's a transition process where control of the associations goes over to the lot owners. Which one are you asking about?
Well, from this standpoint, I really want to know for the township themselves. I've stipulated what is for us as a HOA and the homeowners as a transitional phase, which certain criteria has to be met in the environment, also for the construction, also for the embellishments. And I'm just finding out, I just wanted to find out for clarification, for the township, what are we talking about, Bill, as far as the timeline? Like I heard a year for phase 4, phase 5, halfway through the next year, like 75%. That to me is 2.5 years to be able to go to the township. And I'm just trying to figure out relative to us as residents how this plays into the whole schedule and how this gets transitioned like to the township for their responsibility for dedication, because I think it's very optimistic, and I'm glad you're optimistic as a homeowner. We should all be, and it's generating a lot of occupancy revenue for the township. But I just want to get clarification, because I will have another question about Aaron regarding construction.
If I can answer the first part of that question about, because I think Ms. Camp hit the nail on the head, there's maybe the commingling of questions here. As far as the dedication to the township, of the township improvements, we've asked the township to accept it. We think we're done with what we have to do with Aram Avenue and the park and the Serpentine Barrens and any of the other, and those are the three major public improvements, and the trails in the park. All of that was bonded. The township will now inspect that work, and they will decide whether they agree with us or whether there's other improvements that need to be made before the township is ready to accept that dedication. That process will take place this fall, that inspection process. There's a formal legal process that has to be followed for that dedication. As Bill said, in some of the subsequent phases, there are still streets that will be public streets, and we'll be back next year or a year and a half from now going through the same thing, asking that those specific streets that are supposed to be owned by West Goshen are ready for dedication. They haven't even been built yet. They haven't even, construction hasn't even started. So if your question is about the township, that is the status of where things stand with the township as far as those public improvements being dedicated. The HOA transition, I think, is a different thing.
It's more formal with the HOA.
That's right. There's a certain percentage of homes that need to be sold, and once that percentage of homes is sold, then there'll be a transition of the directorship.
And we have inspections and requirements for that.
That's correct.
As you're transitioning to the township, then I have to respectfully disagree if it's prepared and ready for the transition. Our home butts up against Trail 26. I'm sure you're very familiar with that. Also, the stormwater drainage, the erosion that's occurring around that trail that is now converted from a public trail to a private trail, which I'm really grateful for. But the trail itself, and we have an unseasonable amount of rain that we've had this year, more than other years, granted. But the erosion is there, the runoff is there, you have potential for other flooding. There's been a home in a lower lying area that I can't speak to about legally, but it's been flooded 3 times on 3 occasions because of flooding. So as you're going into the transition, I'm a little apprehensive to say I'm ready for this, because if you have stormwater runoff, you have flooding that's occurring, environmental concerns exist, Aram construction trucks are wearing on Aram Ave. So as you're getting prepared to dedicate that to the township, it impedes upon that structure and that throughway, which is not just construction vehicles, but also commercial vehicles are going through Aram. It's a great place to cut off from 100 to Phoenixville Pike. At one point I suggested that we maybe consider commercial vehicles being limited only to construction. It's wearing down the road. We're not ready for dedicating that to the township and they take ownership of it. I don't think the township wants to assume the responsibility of maintaining something that's still under construction and a thoroughfare for your construction vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I mean, just unfortunately our engineer is not here tonight. And, I'm sure he has many of the same concerns you do. He certainly expressed them at a previous meeting, and that's one of the reasons we're having this continued conversation tonight. The board had previously expressed a lot of concern about taking dedication of the road system, at least. That was being promoted as being ready for dedication. While there is still significant construction associated with the infrastructure for phases 4, 5, and 6 to complete. So the board has expressed previously concern around even considering Aram Avenue while there's intense, heavy, earth-moving equipment using Aram Avenue and causing continued issues, damage to that road. So that's previously expressed. So we certainly share some of your concerns on that. What is new tonight is relative is the expectation or belief from the developer that the park system is now at a point where our engineer and staff will, and the professional engineer will go look at it and say, do we feel the same way, or are we concerned about erosion from the storms, the stormwater drainage and management, what issues that need to be identified. But we need to do some of that to help the developer fix the problems. That's what developing a punch list is all about. So I can't speak to whether it's ready to be looked at, or in the absence of our engineer, who's more in tune with what the actual status is, he would be able to express an opinion as to, hey, he's ready to look at it, thinks it's ready, or he says, I think there's a lot of work still to do, and the dialogue would continue. So I think that's where we are tonight, at least, on the public infrastructure. So let's move to the second point, which was the status of completing the necessary infrastructure. So it's not clear to me whether you have significant roads and other grading work to be done for phases 5 and 6 at least, assuming 4 is fully done at this stage.
Mr. Chairman, may I interject? It looks like Dr. Osgood had a question.
Yeah, can we go back and, I'm sorry, but
sure.
She raised a point about, I'd like to hear the developer's response related to the Trail 26, the basin and the flooding of the home. But I know, Mr. Chair, I know that you were leaving comment, but not heard a response yet from the developer.
25, I believe, Trail 25.
26.
26.
Well, we've been working in concert with NV, Dr. Osgood. I think you're aware of that. We directed some drainage above the wall, which was our first step. We hired a geotechnical engineer. They did a study. They did a lot of holes, and their recommendation was for us in the forebay of the pond that had water in it for a period of time that's required to drain down in through the ground. That doesn't include the forebay, so we put a impervious blanket in the forebay, and that seemed to have a significant improvement. NV is still to lay a 10-inch pipe behind your home to collect that. And the last I heard was that the last rain, or maybe it was 2 rains ago, that it was a positive result, that we didn't get any flooding there. So we're aware of your issue. We're working with NV. We want to solve that problem. We hope that we've done that, or certainly with the addition of the 10-inch pipe that NV will put in, we consider hope to continue to not see water in your basement. That particular trail we utilized in order to get the material in to put the impervious mat down on the forebay in the pond. So it got tore up and whatnot. So we know that. We know it has to be fixed. And we'll come back and do that. I think it's, we did at one time, and I don't know whether it's in the approvals or not, but we certainly recognize, from a developer standpoint, to have that public road, which the public's using, the school buses are using, for us to continue to have that liability, that's a concern for us, just to be honest about it. So that's one reason why we'd like to see the township take the road. We recognize that through the course of additional construction that things may happen to the road, and there's a 18-month maintenance bond on that particular thing. And we also committed, when we were talking about dedication a year and a half ago or so, that we would post a bond sufficient to do another layer of final asphalt on the road if needed. And we would certainly still, provided the road is taken early, we would certainly still be willing to do that. So we recognize that there's issues that still could be out there, but we also recognize that the public's using the road. It's not a private road like a normal subdivision might be.
I have a follow-up question for you on
Sure.
that. So does that mean that you're using the trails then to transport equipment at times throughout the development? You said that you used that trail to bring in some of the piping that you were planning delay? Does that mean, is that going to continue?
No.
Still doing that, going to continue throughout each phase going forward?
No, I mean, if there's an issue out there, like Dr. Osgood's issue, you know, we have an easement that allows us to do those types of things. But those would be, I think, hopefully the oddity that wouldn't happen often.
Do you put signage or close the trail or do anything when you're transporting equipment on them?
Well, we should be putting cones up and prevent, you know, people from walking on it during that period of time. I think that work all happened within a couple hours. It wasn't a big task to go in there and spend days doing it. So, I'm sure the residents know better than me about how long it took, but I would guess that what little bit of work it was less than a day. So there could be an item that may happen, whether it's a resident having a problem like Dr. Osgood or the township having another issue.
And is that because some of the places in the development are only accessible from the trails as far as moving the equipment? Is that where you're using the trail?
Well, in this particular case, access via the trail was the best way to access that pond versus trying to go over somebody's yard or something like that.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Osgood, do you have any follow-up or no? Okay. So we'll move on to the status of completing the remaining infrastructure. So, Mr. Reason, what's preventing you at this moment from just finishing up the roads in phase 5 and 6 and get that done?
Well, it's really a matter of cash availability, cash flow, and purchase of the lots. The lots are purchased over time. We don't want to get 2 years out in front of the builder at that point in time.
Okay.
I have a question relative to dams. I think there's 3.
Relative to what?
Dams.
Yeah.
I think there's 3 on there that is part of the well, eventually the HOA. And then one is the West Goshen. I was there a couple of weeks ago for about 6 hours riding the trails, and I know one of them was, but the gate there and the township employees. And I know one of them needed major work. So I'm just wondering, is the status of the dams completed for all 3?
Dam 184, which is the one furthest downstream,
Okay.
has been fully complete. There's no punch list, and that's fine. And that is the one dam that will be maintained by the township.
Yeah.
There's 2 other dams, which we've rebuilt the dams themselves, and that work is all 100% complete. I think Brian asked us to put a different type of fence in one case, and then we're working, you know, apparently there was an old wall, an old stone wall as part of one dam, and apparently that water is percolating into the stone wall and coming out. It's not really it's not really a leak in the dam, it's just that. So we know we've got that issue to deal with. We're working with Brian and our engineers to come up with a solution for that.
That's the problem I saw.
And we actually dropped the water a foot to see if that water looked like it was coming through the stone wall, and it didn't.
Okay, so
It's really going into the top of the stone and coming down.
Yeah, and that's the problem I saw too. So like I said, dams are not completed yet.
Well, the construction of the dam is complete, and items like that we consider to be in a punch list.
Right.
And we will, by the time Brian gets out and conducts the punch list and that stuff, that work will be done.
The punch list is only dedicated to
Yeah, that's a good point. The 184 is in the parkland. The other 2 dams are to be maintained by the homeowners association, and they are on their own parcel that will be owned by the homeowners association. So it won't be
Right, that was
won't be township
But
property.
I'm just thinking of the residents there, you know, before it's taken over that is completed.
And don't forget, there's an improvement bond that's still in the possession of the township for that work on those, even though they're private, we still have to post an improvement bond for them. I doubt seriously whether that bond's been released based on what I'm hearing here tonight. So just again, to segregate public from private, all of the improvements are secured. It's just some of them are going to the township, and then some of them are eventually going to the HOA. Those 2 dams are going to the HOA. 184 is
This
as part of
township.
this, as part of this dedication request.
Yes, just to circle back to the completion of the infrastructure based on what you said, Bill, it's certainly, I don't think, changed my opinion at this point around wanting to see the heavy infrastructure completed before Aram Avenue is considered dedication or acceptance by the township. That's my personal view. I'm not speaking to the other board members, but just so you know, we currently have a difference of opinion on that one, please. So let's move on to number 3, construction of the trail network. And you said, we think they are completed, the park improvements are ready now for inspection, right? So I know Brian had a heads up from conversations with you that this was likely to be something you expected to, get to this point here over the summer, and that therefore this was going to be something he would, together with our consulting engineers, be looking at in the weeks and couple of months coming up here. Chris, I don't know if you have any update from talking to Brian more recently with me, but
No,
does that sound about right?
That sounds accurate, Mr. Chairman, but I don't have any additional information.
So one thing we need to consider is
I'm sorry.
no problem. So one thing we need to consider is, depending on how much work is needed, how long it's going to take, is it could be that theoretically the park or the trail system is ready for dedication, but we've still got this issue of Aram Avenue and access to the park system by a public road. So I'm just flagging that up now as potentially an issue for it to resolve.
Yeah,
So,
from our perspective, if you're not willing to take the park or you're not willing to take the road, we don't see any reason to take the park if you don't take the road. Because like you said, there's no access to get to the park.
okay.
So if that's the case, then we'll keep the park private, we'll block it off, we'll block the parking lots off, and go that route until you are prepared for take the park.
Okay. Is there anyone attending who wants to ask a question specific to infrastructure, completion, the park trail system, readiness, etc.? I know we've already heard from one lady back there. Yes, sir. Would you mind stating your name and where you live, please?
Yes. My name is André Mourier. I live at 1184 Squirthorpe Drive in the Woodlands.
1184 Squirthorpe?
Yeah, 1184 Squirthorpe Drive in the Woodlands. We've been here for 2.5 years, and we love our home, we love the location, we love the community, we're very happy. But I do have a question for the advisor and you. We observe what's happening with infiltration pond W3. Infiltration pond W3, that's the name of the infiltration pond.
Okay.
And also Trail 26, which is between the infiltration pond and the homes of the owners that are along Squirthorpe. The heavy rains that we've had recently have put the trail, and as we well know with what happened on White Street, to the test. When we bought our home, we asked a question, a very simple question from the project manager. I'm an engineer by profession. And I said, why do you not funnel the water that comes from the swale between the homes, particularly for the homes that are on high grounds, shuttle that water under the trail into the pond? And the answer was, no. This was it. No, we've never done this in any development. But recently, with the heavy rains we've had, there's been a lot of damage done to the Trail 26, sedimentation, erosion, land disturbance. And I'm glad to see, and I want to thank you and thank Andy Holmes, I don't know exactly who did it, to see that some troughs were built with pipes to do exactly what I had requested 2.5 years ago. At the end of the swale, you have a funnel, you collect the water, it goes under the trail, and it is dumped into the sediment pond. Right? This was done between 4 homes. This leaves 3 homes that are on much higher grounds, still feeding a tremendous amount of water, run water, onto the trail. The trail is washed off, basically. All the crushed stone is gone. The sediments are covering the trails. The trees, some of the trees here are being uprooted, as you know. And the water has no place to go but along the trail and all the way down to the sediment pond, which increased the flow or the volume of water going to the sediment pond. Was it designed to handle all that volume of water? I'm not an expert. I don't know. But I have some concern, because ultimately the trail will become a very high maintenance item of the HOA. So that's a real concern, and I wish that, I know that what you've done, with the pipes, the runoff pipes going under the trail, that'd be very helpful. But I think it should be done also uniformly, and particularly for the homes that are on high grounds that provide a tremendous amount of water when it rains to the trail, over the trail, and anywhere.
Yeah, if there continues to be an issue with the trail and washout or whatnot, we'll have to address that. I can tell you that the trail is built according to the plan, and that the swales that are there and directing the water to the pond were built according to the plan.
Right.
Now, if the engineering of it is falling short of what needs to be done, then we'll continue to take a look at it and make sure it gets repaired.
Right.
We don't want the HOA to have an erosion problem on a trail at all.
And if I may take one more second, in relation to the question that these supervisor here asked about access to the infiltration pond. The sediment part of the infiltration pond is right above the retention wall and the whites down there. It is not close to Aram at all. Trail 26 is going to be rough and it is flooded, so it will be rough. There will be no access on Trail 26 for trucks or anything like this to dredge the sediment pond or the infiltration pond. My question is, the only access you will have to have will be exactly what has been happening lately, directly from Aram over the landscape. The landscaping, basically the trees, the grass and everything else, every time the HOA will have to dredge the infiltration ponds or the sediment pond. So what are the provisions to avoid that?
There are none. The easement to access the pond for maintenance is on top of the trail. So at what point in time, 10, 15, 20 years from now, that pond needs maintenance, then the trail would be the place in which the HOA would utilize to do that.
Are there other questions relative to the infrastructure around the park system? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one, which was restoration of the barrens. So Mr. Reezy, you mentioned that DCNR is aware, has approved this process that you're using or have used this season to address the removal of the invasive species, et cetera, that you explained. So, have you shared that with staff of the township? Yeah. You believe that the work is now complete and that therefore, once the seeding is completed, the barrens is essentially ready also for dedication to the township.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Who did you consult with as an expert in barrens with this revised design? And are they still involved with you as you finish up this work to get the completion of the barrens?
Yes, we had a biologist involved, Scott Bush was involved, who is actually the author of the report and the plan.
Yeah, Lou sent me an email, and Chris, indicating that, because I had indicated that we would want to know that DCNR approved the revisions, and they did have an email chain indicating that the DCNR representative was comfortable with the revisions. It's really not changing what was being done, it was accelerating it, and they were comfortable with that. So Scott Bush was their senior ecologist from a company called GHD. He had designed the original plan, and he had communicated back with DCNR, so we can forward
Okay,
this
so
email
he
on.
was involved with the original
Yes.
test.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris. He continues to inspect and direct us on the front.
Okay, thank you. So a question relative to, if the barrens are ready for inspection and we proceed with that and, we believe that the work is complete, same question relative to the park system. If the township, board and staff remain opposed to dedication of Barren Avenue, would you say, well, in that case, there's no point in dedicating the barrens at this time? Or is it different?
I don't know that it's much different. There is an access from a parking lot on Phoenixville where somebody could walk into the barrens and see it. But to continue to walk down that trail out into the park and the trail system within the park, I don't see any benefit in that. So
Okay.
it, probably prevent people from parking in that parking lot too.
Okay.
We need to treat it as a private park, not take dedication now until you're ready.
Okay. I may be wrong on this, but I believe there's infrastructure at Green Hill Road and Phoenixville Pike, the second intersection there that still needs to have some work on it. Is that correct?
That is correct. A little right turn going on to Green Hill from Phoenixville Pike. That's the last one piece that needs to be done.
When is that off-site?
That's a Department of Transportation road and it's bonded through them.
Do you know when that is scheduled to be done?
It's a small amount of work that we probably could do it almost any time, but we're planning on it next summer.
Next summer?
Yeah.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Reza or Lou Collier? Is there anyone else has some more questions at this point relative to any of the issues that we've been discussing tonight? Okay, so I think that's it. Is there anything else to add, Kristen or staff? What are the next steps here at this point?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think the next steps were the Developers Council has written a phase 1 letter pursuant to, or a phase 1 letter about the bond pursuant to the municipality.
That's just a phase 1 improvements.
Correct. Requesting release of just under $1.6 million. So we would need to authorize the township engineer to conduct the necessary inspection and prepare the punch list for any items for the developer. And he would have to complete that within 30 days, I believe.
Okay.
The punch list.
He'd complete the inspection and provide the punch list to the developer.
Specific to phase 1 improvements.
Correct.
Well, yeah, but phase 1 improvements is much broader. It's Aram Avenue, the park, the trails, the dams, that's all bonded in phase 1. Yeah, that's that $5 million bond Lou was talking about.
There's $1.5 million left to release.
Right, so as the work was being completed, they would send in requests for inspections and releases, and those releases have been approved. So of the, we're just going to say it was $5 million that was originally bonded with the first financial security agreement for phase 1 improvements, not just phase 1 of the lots, but phase 1 of the overall development improvements. What his letter is indicating that there's how much left? Yeah, $1.5 million. So the MPC sets forth a very specific time frame for a developer asking for the township. They send you a letter, you have to acknowledge the receipt of that letter and then send your engineer out within 30 days of your receipt of that letter. Then the engineer prepares a punch list. I will tell you that normally it's not done this formally. I mean, it's you know, developers, in this case, they're asking for this formal process to be followed. So we have to have a punch list completed within 30 days, unless we ask for an extension. I'm not sure we'll get that. So in any event, it's starting the process to complete the punch list. If Brian isn't able to do it himself, he'll have to use Carroll Engineering or whatever engineering firm has been involved in doing these inspections. That they expect that list to be, you know, to have an extensive amount of things. They already know about some of them, and there will not be dedication, regardless of the timing of what the board decides, until all those punch list items are completed to be certified. So, it's very confusing because things that are bonded aren't just things that are public improvements. So, for example, the Trail 26, that probably has money associated with that. So, part of the inspection will be to make sure that Trail 26 is built the way it was designed. If there is a problem that has come about as a result of rain or improper design, whatever, that hopefully will come out through the punch list process.
Yeah, so I mean, I know from the discussion tonight, there's quite a few concerns and issues related to certainly the drainage, trail system, washouts, etc. I know you said that the pond performance has been fixed. It was identified some time ago, etc. So we need, you know, Brian's going to need to assess all these things to determine if that is the case.
Right.
It's likely, like you said, it's going to be an extensive punch list, some of which may or may not be fully realized in terms of do we know all the issues at this point.
So how and when then is the 1.5 release?
Only after they've completed the punch list, we've gone back out to certify that the punch list is completed.
Does this, I'm sorry, that's in the weeds here. Does this punch list does this phase one request include, for example, these dam fixes that are still needed on the HOA property? Or is that entirely different?
That's different. There's a phase one community-wide improvements, which is the one that the letter references to, which is the park and Aram Avenue. There is still some remaining bond on phase one subdivision development, which included all the townhouses, the portion of the active adult that people have been talking about today, which has that pond in it. So, you know, there's still a bond out there in which to take care of those types of issues. And as I said, we certainly plan to do it.
Just to be clear, the only bond release that's being requested now is for the public, for things that are going to eventually come to Goshen Township. They didn't address the other privately bonded improvements, which you're still holding a bond for, you're still holding a financial security for. So I don't know whether this trail's 26 or where, I don't know where it's located. That's one of the public improvements. It's not.
No.
Okay. And that would be covered by a separate bond. No one's asking for release of that bond at this time.
So the dams that are going to be HOA too, after you completed your punch list relative to them, who on their side is inspecting the dams? Like on our side, the township's inspecting it once you give the punch list. Who's doing it on their end?
That's up to them. They can hire an engineer if they want. They typically have a transition engineer that they hire that does a complete punch list for them, for the HOA.
Okay, so it's up to them.
The whole new cottage industry on transition of developments to HOAs. Engineers and lawyers getting very wealthy on that process.
One thing that's bothering me a little bit is we performed this inspection on the phase one improvements. We identified a list of punch list set of items that need addressing. They get addressed. I don't know how quickly they'll be addressed, but let's just say they get addressed fairly quickly. But then we talked earlier about if we don't want to accept dedication, it could be another year or two before that park and road become dedicated to the township. So what happens if new issues arise after you've completed the punch list and this bond's been released?
I mean, that's part of the issue, Mr. Chairman, is that, I mean, we constructed it, we're out there doing our internal punch lists, we've sent the letter, our intent was to get the road and the park bond released as well as dedicated. So if the board decides that you don't want to take dedication of the road, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take dedication of the park to us. So we would probably stop spending money. And at some point in time, if we had a problem on a pathway, we would either deal with it with the association or we would close that pathway off. And I haven't even thought through that process.
Okay.
It's important, though, but one of the things I think, you know, we can close it up if you'd like, but don't forget, only the public improvements, when you release from the improvement bond, that is substituted then by yet another bond. Believe it or not.
The maintenance bond. But remember, the conditional use order has that bond lasting longer than 18 months. So there's language in the conditional use order that contemplated that if the township wanted to accept dedication of Aram Avenue before the development was fully built out, rather than just requiring an 18-month maintenance bond, which is what the MPC allows the township to require, the conditional use order requires them to have the bond go longer than 18 months until such time as the construction is 100% completed. I don't have that language in front of me, but I can provide that condition. So it's to cover that issue, that you decide, okay, they do the punch list, you say, you know what, we do want the road, we do want the park, let's get it in our hands, let's let the public use it. This maintenance bond, that we release the $5 million completely, the $1.5 million that's left, they then post another bond and they sign a maintenance security agreement that specifies what the purpose of that bond is. And that will, let's say that bond, again, the conditional use order has the specific language, but let's say it says that that bond remains in effect until all of the construction is completed. So what happens is they'll let us know 3-4 months prior to construction being completed, we send our engineer out again. They do a maintenance bond inspection, and they do a maintenance bond punch list. And before you release that maintenance bond, they have to go back and fix things that were, not everything, but things that were defects, if the workmanship was wrong, or the structural stability of the improvement didn't last the way it was supposed to. They're required to go back and fix
What about
that.
damage to the road after we take, so you're saying if we take dedication of Aram Avenue, then we have a maintenance bond, and then before we release the maintenance bond at the end of that, we go back again and look at another punch list. So if you have construction vehicles going up and down, or like commercial vehicles that are damaging the road, you would then go back and fix any damages, or just initial construction?
No, like for example, inlets, stormwater inlets, sometimes those get ruined through construction vehicles. That's the kind of thing that, curbing.
I wasn't aware that this was sort of an option, or a way that.
It's a bootstrap, and it works pretty well. When you think about it in this case, let's look at, and my math is awful, so somebody, I know it's wrong, but if you posted a $5 million improvement bond, as we did, for the public improvements, you're going to keep, even if you write off on all the improvements and say you're good to go and release the improvement bond, 15% of that comes back to the township as a maintenance bond. So whatever 15% of $5 million is, you would have as a maintenance bond. And as Ms. Camp pointed out, as pertains to Aram Avenue, that maintenance bond can stay with the township for 2 years, 3 years. The law limits it to 18 months, but we agreed earlier in the conditional use decision many years ago that if the township does take that road, and if there's still construction vehicles going up and down it, then you can keep the maintenance bond until you say, okay, the construction vehicles are done now, let's go out and do the final inspection, and then if you have to pave a portion, or if you have to do the curves and fix the storm, then you do it then. So we tried to cover that eventuality because we knew this day would come when people are going to want to use that park. You have a 162-acre beautiful park out there that's ready, maybe someday soon, to be used. But there are ways to deal with that. I think there are ways to protect the township in the eventuality.
Is there a difference between existing bond and finding design defects that you can fix for it to work correctly, and a maintenance bond where that liability is now with the township when it comes to design inadequacy?
That's correct. The maintenance bond will not cover design defects. The township reviewed, approved the design of that road. So far, I'm not aware of any problems with the design of it. It only covers...
I'm thinking more of the other systems, the trail system, the park system, it's all part of phase one.
Yeah, it's all part of the park.
All part of phase one. So we know the submissions today, we punch list them, we get some fixed, and then next spring and summer there's a whole bunch of new issues, which is already ours. Hey, well, their design defect's not, or maybe it's not a, same as a road problem felt damage, where a maintenance bond will fix it. That is a difference up here.
Well, the only risk is if the cost of the work exceeds the maintenance bond amount, then that's the risk the township is
It's 15%,
taking.
so if we something like 600.
750.
Yeah, but that's not a lot. $869 is not a lot.
We're fixing a drainage under Balmar Street. It's, what is it, over $1 million?
It's, yeah.
836.
That's my point. So we're taking a
Doesn't
big risk.
matter.
We have a maintenance bond. It's nice to have it, but it's not a lot of money.
So
We're
15%.
talking infrastructure.
It's
15% of this, 15% of the number that was posted for the phase one bond is $869,240.
That's not even going to fix a storm drain. So that's my concern. It's nice we have it, but
I know.
it's not a lot of money.
Don't forget, there was also $1 million paid to the township, or as part of the recreational fee for the park as well. So it's not as though the park went defenseless. I mean, this was all discussed, financed, planned out. There was accounts set up. You knew someday that you were going to have to take over maintenance of a 162-acre park. And now that day has come. So if there's things that need to be fixed by the developer, he will fix them. But I think eventually you're going to have to ask yourself, you have to pull the plug sooner or later. I mean, I would think.
Well, that's the key question. What is sooner and later versus the board's position on it? Sooner is, hey, we just got it all finished. Can you take it, get our punch list done? Versus, hey, every time we're looking out there, there's a rainstorm. There's a set of issues that come up. So we just have to work that balance out.
Right? Fine. We just want to start the process.
Yeah, there we go.
I understand.
So, okay, are there other questions that anyone's... Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, I forget your
Carol
name.
Bourrier.
Carol,
Just for clarification, because I know the conditional use order, who wrote the conditional use order for Trail 26? Who is the person that writes the conditional use order? Just for clarification.
It's a board decision. Just like tonight when you were sitting here to watch the quality and decision, our firm drafted a conditional use approval that the board ultimately provided their input and consent to and voted on. And there are several different documents that govern the zoning approvals and land development approvals. It's not just one document. There were modifications to the original conditional use order. There's preliminary plan approval and final plan approval. So there were some modifications. You have to look sort of at all of those documents as a whole.
And the fact that RDL, a legal representative for RDL, wrote the conditional use order.
They didn't write the conditional use order. That's what I'm saying. It's a decision of the Board of Supervisors. The solicitor drafts it and the board votes on it.
Okay.
They don't do anything with it.
Then it was a misrepresentation, because our understanding why it went from public to a private trail, which just occurred recently, was because of legal representation that wrote the actual conditional use order. So I just wanted to get clarification.
That's not, to clarify, I know that township had anything to do with that. What happened there is we went back and looked at the original plans, and they were called out to be private plans. There was nothing to require West Goshen to accept dedication.
So thank you for that clarification.
But the township had nothing to do with that.
Yes, sir.
That was a very simple question. Considering all the issues that we've been mentioning tonight regarding Trail 26, with water drainage, runoffs, and everything else, why not? This is a very short trail that serves very little purpose. It connects basically a public, what is going to be a public road, to a private road, which is Castle. And it runs right in the backyard of 11 homes there, which is almost an invasion of privacy. Why not do away with it?
Yeah, it's on the land development plan. You bought a lot with that on the land development plan. So that was part of, the developer is required to build those trails per the plan.
Sure, but could that not be amended? Based on
Not without the developer agreeing to that and presenting it to the board. It's already been constructed.
Based on all the issues that we're facing with.
I think you have to let the process play out, sir. I think that, I know this is the first time I'm hearing about Trail 26 and problems. The township engineer is not here.
Right.
They have asked for the process for that evaluation. Actually, I may be confusing it because the request to start the inspection is for the public improvements. If Trail 26 is a private improvement,
Right.
that hasn't initiated yet, but there's no reason that he can't go out there and try to work with everybody to get to a solution. And we can sure, I don't want to speak for Chris, but I think we can ask Brian to take a look at that. Yeah.
Thank you for this clarification.
I just think that response was something that's so defensive. I think it was a simple question, and I think it required a simple response, which is we can amend it with approval of the developer, but it's, I don't know.
Well, it's not that simple, sir. They have to request it. The HOA has to consent to it, and the board has to consent to it. It's a three-party approval.
I just think, I don't know if you work for us as the township, but I just think it was unnecessarily defensive, but thank you.
Well, I didn't mean to be defensive. I just want to make sure you understand it's not as simple as two parties agreeing to it. They have contractual obligations to you, and they have land development and zoning approval requirements to the township. So it is sort of a triangle.
And just to close that, I've been involved in probably 10 trail removal requests. Usually when residents move in after, they ask to have trails removed. One homeowner can stop that process from going forward because everybody who buys pursuant to that plan is entitled to have that trail installed where it was shown on that plan. So sometimes you might have 99% of the homeowners who say, yeah, we would like to have that trail removed. One person can say, well, I don't consent. So it's not as simple. It is, trust me, it's one of the more difficult issues following development of a subdivision. It's not simple to change the land.
Are there any other questions at this time? Does the board have any final questions? All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Thank you. All right, well, we're on to agenda item number 8, which is is a discussion regarding proposed ordinance amendment for electric vehicle charging stations. Chris, would you get the board focused on this after that lengthy discussion on woodlands? Help us understand what this is about.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So before the board this evening is discussion regarding proposed ordinance amendment for electric vehicle charging stations. Proposed ordinance would address new construction and redevelopment. The amendment was discussed at the July 25th, 2023 meeting of the Sustainability Advisory Committee, who recommended its approval. Proposed language before the board this evening is based on a review of the draft ordinance being considered by Westchester Borough, as well as a recently adopted ordinance from Phoenixville Borough. I have bolded and italicized proposed language in section B of 1 and B, as the SAC determined that the board should discuss the appropriate requirement pertaining to infrastructure for level A charging stations. As this ordinance would potentially be incorporated into the township's land use regulations, it will need to be reviewed by both our planning commission and the Chester County Planning Commission pursuant to the municipality's planning code. And this is draft language. Ms. Camp has not put this into the township's standard ordinance format, so it'll have to be formatted accordingly.
Question, are you familiar with this from your work at Westchester Borough?
No, they did not get me involved at all. And when I got this, I definitely have comments and concerns that I would want to go over. So I'm not sure.
It's an initial conversation tonight around this. I know the SEC has certainly had a lot of questions about it. The board, I'm sure, is going to have a lot of questions. The intention is to try to move the process moving forward to get to an EV-ready ordinance, but recognizing that potentially is quite a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and I would just say that as far as the authority for it, it comes from the MPC. So Article 5 of the MPC has a section 503 that identifies what types of provisions the board has the authority to include in a subdivision land development ordinance. And that section specifically says that you can provide or add into your subdivision ordinance provisions to encourage the use of renewable energy systems. So I think that is the authority that you have to focus on and put it into your SALDO regulations. Section 603 of the MPC deals with zoning regulations and identifies what your power is for zoning provisions. There's not a similar corollary provision in zoning to address renewable energy systems. So I think to make it be the most legally defensible, these provisions should really stay within your SALDO ordinance, which obviously has applicability requirements based on the state law. So it has to constitute a subdivision as that word is defined in state law, and it has to constitute a land development as that word is defined in state law. And then I think they're legally defensible. The one provision that has me most concerned, and again, it's another dialogue, I'm happy to go to the SAC. Remember that Pennsylvania is required to follow the statewide building code. So when you're talking about the construction of a single dwelling, that is governed by the statewide building code, and you don't have the authority to impose more stringent requirements. So for example, when it's Act 45 of 1999, that's when Pennsylvania adopted a statewide building code, and municipalities had to either opt in or opt out. You opted in 2003, I think, or 2004 was when the regulations from the Department of Labor and Industry were finalized, and that's when you had, I think, 180 days to opt in or opt out. At that time, if you had provisions in your building code that exceeded the requirements of the statewide code, you were allowed to grandfather those in. So I live in West Whiteland, and West Whiteland at the time required sprinklers in single-family dwellings. So my house has sprinklers. The code, when it was adopted, did not allow townships to require sprinklers in single-family detached dwellings. So I believe that a requirement that would only apply to something that has to be constructed in a single-family dwelling, if it's not in the statewide building code, you would have to go to the Department of Labor and Industry to get that approval. There's a process to make a more stringent requirement, and you have a burden of proof to do that. So that's one of the things I'd be concerned about. But as far as applying to subdivisions or land developments, I think you absolutely have the right to require these types of standards.
So Chris, you were of the opinion or thought that we may have been able to put this in our zoning ordinance, correct?
Yes, and I was wrong.
Okay.
I had originally thought to put this in the zoning ordinance, knowing that this was a desire of the board, thinking it could fit into our parking requirements. I did have a conversation with Kristen last week or the week before, and I agree with everything she said. Now, in the subdivision ordinance, a potential developer could request a waiver, but granting of those waivers are always at the discretion of the board, so you can always choose not to waive it.
So this is in Phoenixville, Salado.
Correct.
Yeah. And they also have something in their parking regulations. So to the extent that you're dealing with public parking lots, that also, you control what gets constructed and what can be used in your public parking lot. So that's another provision that Phoenixville dealt with, was their public parking lots.
So you said encouraging this sort of use. Is there a difference between us being able to require and encourage in our Salado?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think the general standard for a provision in your subdivision ordinance is that you are trying to achieve a legitimate government purpose, and that your restriction or your regulation is aimed at achieving that purpose with the least restrictive use of land, or the least, I'm not saying it right. I want to study it a little bit more, but I do think that at least it promotes that, it has that language that, maybe we have to think through, like, number one, I want to do case law research to make sure there's not been one that's challenged. I'm not aware of any ordinances on the books that have been challenged and gone through the appellate court system. But I think it's how you structure it, and maybe it's like some sort of bonus that you provide. Like, if you provide these, then you get a break on, I don't know, impervious coverage, or that's a zoning requirement, so that really would work. But there's ways that can be structured that would incentivize and I think be legal. So.
Just for clarification, so for example, the land development that we approved tonight for Fernhill Road, where there was a 13,000 square foot warehouse and some parking changes. If we have this in our saldo, would it require them to put an EV, whatever it is, put it in EV charging, or would it again be one of those they can just say no? We wouldn't have that pattern.
Yeah, I mean, they can request waiver. Like I said, I want to think through that a little bit more. I think that you can definitely require them to design the parking lot to have the conduits to put it in, but whether or not you can require them to actually put the actual charging station and make that expense. I mean, if it was, again, there might be related to the use, it might go back to a certain type of use where that's going to be needed. More so, certain uses might be more needed to have that versus.
But again, didn't this come from Phoenixville? I mean, aren't they requiring charging stations? Or is it requesting?
This came from Westchester, and then we looked at the Phoenixville ordinance
I
and
thought
they
that
put
Westchester
certain.
looked at Phoenixville.
I didn't have any Henry, did you have any conversations directly with Westchester? Because I did not.
Phoenixville's the only one that actually has it adopted.
This document was provided to us by the staff.
Will Williams, but it hasn't been vetted by their council yet. It's not gone through the process yet.
That's correct.
Right.
And it is fashioned after Phoenixville. And Kristen, are you saying that Phoenixville is under a different government structure and therefore they can do it?
No, the state law that they're bound by is the MPC.
So then how is it, so is it in their saldo that there's charging stations?
So how are they getting away with that?
Yeah,
Well, it doesn't mean that they.
You can do it in saldo.
Yeah, I mean,
You can do it in saldo, you can't have it in your zoning ordinance.
A charging station, John?
To put the charging station in, I don't know, maybe there's been no test of that.
There's been no test of it yet. Yeah, I mean, again, I want to fully research it and be able to provide you more guidance.
So why don't we wait and let legal review?
Yeah, we need.
And then bring it back to the SAC and then bring it back to the board.
But can we talk about some guidance for Kristen around what we see? So, for example, the Wawa that's coming in, Kristen.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a commercial redevelopment that the board would like to see a saldo requirement for them to have to put in. I'm just going to suggest a level 3 charging system there, not just level 2, which they may come with and then all that development. So that would be one example of how do we craft something that is specific to certain types of redevelopment where we can kind of make it a mandated requirement, and they would have to ask for a waiver on, versus something that's more like this commercial redevelopment we were just talking about, where it's just employees only and it's not a public use, and you know, that kind
Yeah, I mean, would you be identifying specifically criteria where you know for sure you want them to do it? Is it when it's a public use, like a convenience store, or a shopping center, or a grocery store? Is it?
Well,
I think that's
definitely to start with that.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of told us, look, you can't force it on multi-family dwellings or residential issues. You can't require it where it's a residential building permit code driven by the state.
So for all new residential construction, we cannot require that the developer, the home builder, build a conduit that would enable somebody, whoever moved in.
No, what I said was if on a single lot, so the provision under A3, all new single-family dwelling units, new expanded or reconstructed garages shall be constructed to provide a dedicated branch circuit and overcurrent protection to accommodate a future minimum level 2. That's talking about, I own my lot, I'm getting a building permit to build my dwelling. That's not in the statewide code. But that's not to say that and that's where I want to think about it, because if you have the Woodlands coming to you for a conditional use request, right? It's conditional use has a little bit more flexibility, and there's a little bit more of trading, to be honest with you. I mean, some of the provisions that they agreed to, they could have challenged probably. I mean, there's a record that's created, so you know if the board wants to see some conditions imposed, you have to create a record to justify this.
Quality in, right? We just put the condition then they agreed to it, but they could have said no, we don't accept.
That's right. Right. So there is, I don't want to say that there's no ability, I wouldn't put it in your zoning ordinance necessarily, but in conditional use applications, like if the Wawa comes in for conditional use and there's testimony about, hey, we see that you're building these in other municipalities, you know, we see that this is going to be a really viable location for these types of chargers. Is this something that you would accept as a condition and do? So that's one way to get it. I'd have to look at other things that are in your saldo that you could maybe incentive. It's more of you may want to structure it as incentivizing them to provide these. And if they do you do provide them, you get a break on. Again, can't come up with a suggestion right now, but there may be other ways to incentivize rather than to absolutely positively mandate. And maybe they do this in lieu of having to do that.
Let me understand, are you suggesting that, or are you saying that's the way it has to go?
I'm suggesting that's one way to go about it. I want to continue to do the research on whether you absolutely can mandate it across the board in your subdivisions.
Is there anything legally that would not allow the township to require? In other words, here we have the word shall, which is requirement. It's not saying it would be a nice thing to do, it's saying you shall do it. Is there anything legally which says that, in your own estimation or your opinion, which says that the township could not mandate it?
I'm not prepared to provide that response.
Okay, so it really sounds like we need to do some work.
And just, I don't know if this was stated, but Wawa will need conditional use approval under a zoning ordinance. And I'm looking at Phoenixville's ordinance, and it doesn't look like they're requiring the installation of the actual charging stations from what I'm reading. It does look like they're requiring the installation of the infrastructure necessary to connect them. Correct. But then if you do install the charging stations, there are criteria within there to do it. But we have to do more research on it, but I'm not reading this to say.
Yeah, I see it that any land development, this is Phoenixville, any land development proposing more than 20 parking spaces shall install a new main electrical switchgear or replace existing electrical switchgear that provides sufficient space and capacity to support the operation of a level 2 EVCS for at least 20% of the parking. So that's not saying.
Is that in their parking requirement?
No, this is in their saldo. So they're not saying you shall install the charger, it's saying you shall install the main electrical switchgear.
Well, that's like 90% of the cost of doing the work.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're looking at your subdivision, you have design standards for parking lot, not so much how many parking spaces you will have their requirements are within their design standards for a parking lot.
Yeah.
So I think the goal of the SAC's conversation around this was really to provide some of our thinking from that conversation for further research. These numbers, these 20%, this is all stuff that the board is considering moving forward. None of this is concrete. This is really just to get it out
I think what we need, Chris, is for you to pull together something that you believe is legally defensible, gives us the most flexibility to, either require it where we can, or have flexibility to incentivize it where we could, where you think our power is a little more limited. And then these specific things about how many for what, we can figure that out when we get further along, because we don't want to get into the weeds when we don't even know what it is we may or may not be able to do.
Okay. Yeah.
I had a question.
Henry?
I just had a couple questions. What you're saying concisely is you cannot enforce zoning. It has to be through the seller. And is that different from the question of being allowed to pass a regulation, an ordinance which requires level 2 build out for individual homes?
Right, so as a second-class township, they only have the authority that the state law provides to them. So as it relates to land development and zoning, the enabling legislation is the municipality's planning code. And so that is the document that I looked at for the legal authority to impose these types of requirements on what I call what the state law defines as being a subdivision or a land development. The enabling legislation for what they can require for the development of a single-family dwelling is the statewide building code. And the statewide building code does not give them the authority to mandate that a charger be built within a garage of a single-family dwelling.
For the raceway or anything having to do with it?
Correct.
Okay.
So Henry, this kind of goes back to the conversation you and I had yesterday about ensuring that it's defensible.
And I will say that, the MPC gets revised. So as this becomes something that there's political support for and a need for and a demand for, you may very well see the enabling legislation be revised. So it just because, again, I don't know the status of the law, and I want to do much broader research on it, but this is going to happen. I mean, it's going to happen. So
Plus there'll be a public demand for it.
Right, absolutely.
Construction's going to want to have a 20-volt circuit in the garage, so. Anyway, all right. Go ahead, sorry.
One more thing. I think that the SAC is not asking the legal questions. They're asking what makes sense for various land uses as to the level of charger you install and how many EV ready and how many EV capable these various levels, and what would be best for the future to make sure that we're not requiring more that's going to be used, or that we're requiring enough so that we start the process of switching.
So if it's in El Salvador, let's say we make good progress and we end up with something in El Salvador, let's say we over or underestimated these kind of specific numbers that Henry's talking about. Can we change that by resolution? Or
But that's what I was, as you were saying that, I'm thinking you have, almost like you did with those tax credits, where you establish the fact that you're going to have the credit, but the amount of the fee was set forth in a resolution. So that's one way we could try to think about doing it.
Yeah, that'd be useful, because
the chapter amended.
We don't know exactly
Right.
what might make sense, and we
Right.
certainly want to be flexible, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just another point. Henry and I have been having some email exchanges here. Do we have a PICO customer representative? Somebody that we deal with from PICO?
Yes, regional government affairs representative, yes.
I just wonder if you could share that with me, because I'm going to investigate to see what the cost would be for like level 3 chargers. We've been having that discussion about how much that would, how much of a burden that might place upon the developer. But if you could give me that information, I'd like to pose some questions towards that particular individual.
Thanks, John. Anything else from the board? Henry, any last questions? So the ball's with Kristen and moving it forward. All right, thank you. Next is agenda item number 9, which is discussion regarding proposal for maintenance of historic Weeping Beech Tree on Old Fairtel Road.
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening are proposals for work associated with the historic Weeping Beech Tree on Old Fairtel Road. 2 proposals were received, one from Ward Landscaping and one from Davy Tree Company. The work involved would include cleanup of fallen branches and removal of the invasive overgrowth that has occurred. The proposals were Davy Tree Company, $5,300, and Ward Landscaping, $1,900. The SAC discussed these proposals at their meeting on July 25th and recommended approval of the proposal from Ward Landscaping. Reviewing the budget, the board had previously authorized an expenditure of funds for maintenance of the Weeping Beech Tree out of our park maintenance operating expense. There was $10,000 for tree work allocated in this category, and to date there's been just over $6,300 that's been spent. I understand there's a wide price difference, but we did review the scope of work, and the scope of work for both was identical.
So I have a fundamental question here, because since this is already approved in terms of the budget line item to spend money on tree maintenance within the park's accounts, does this really even need board approval, or does it just do the work and just until you go over the budget or need more money, then the board really can just
We had discussed this previously when this came up earlier this year. We marked specific tree work for that $10,000. This wasn't included, so this is over and above the work that we had previously allocated in the budget.
So every time we spend money this year at least, we should really approve it.
My plan is to look at the expenditures for 2023 and allocate that money for 2025.
Got it. Thank you. Well, we certainly want to support the efforts of looking after this tree. It's been something we've already approved expenditures on, so I will make the motion to have Ward Landscaping for the cost of $1,900 take care of the maintenance for this historic Weeping Beech Tree. Thank you.
I will add that at the SAC meeting, we had a conversation around ongoing maintenance of the tree. And some questions were raised and some ideas sort of tossed around, one of which is to have the tree maintained really in-house.
Yeah, for this kind of work.
Yeah,
But this isn't a treatment kind of work, this is just
right,
brush removal and weeding.
I think the first one that they went in and they removed a lot of the brush was a big job. But going forward, we can do this a couple times a year and we can train trainer and workforce staff to do that.
Yep. Are you okay at least for this current one to have it done by the board? So a motion in a second. Is there any public comment, questions on
I
it?
just wonder with the second one and maybe the last one, if we should coordinate that with the green staff to be there for this next.
See what?
To see what they're doing, because it may be the last, or it could be the last, and then if we save money for it as of,
Okay.
if we can coordinate that effort with the green staff.
Sounds good, good idea. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Thanks. Agenda item number 10 is discussion and possible approval of an engagement of BBD for independent auditing services for fiscal years 23 to 26.
Mr. Chairman, before the board this evening is consideration to appoint BBD Inc. to perform independent auditing services for the township for fiscal years 2023 through 2026. At the November 1st, 2022 meeting, the board awarded a one-year contract to BBD to serve as the township's auditing firm. This was in response to the RFP that was issued. As part of the RFP process, the township did request pricing for a 5-year period. Myself and our finance director spoke with BBD Inc. and they've agreed to adhere to the pricing outlined in their RFP, which is as follows: for fiscal year 2023, $37,000, and then for fiscal years 2024 through 2026, $38,000 per year.
Yeah, so I remember as the outcome of the RFP process, I, for one, was certainly skeptical about BBD's ability to execute the amount of work for the price they bid. We've gone through the audit process, there weren't any change orders, they delivered for the fee that they agreed to, and now they're committed to these remaining fees. So I think that's a really great outcome. And, I congratulate my fellow board members who were less skeptical.
I think you weren't at that meeting when we approved it.
I wasn't.
Oh, you approved it? I'll make the motion that we go ahead and approve the contract for the next year.
Thank you, John. I'll second the motion. Make myself useful. Is there any questions or comments from the board, or any public comments or questions? Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Next is agenda item number 11. Reports for the month of July. Waiting patiently to present the police report this month is Captain Video.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the board, the month of July 2023 police report for the West Goshen Police Department. We fielded 2,005 calls for the month of July. 46 of them were alarm responses, 3 of which were valid. There was 58 responses to the motor vehicle collisions, 18 of which were reportable, 49 reportable, and a total of 16,425 miles. Continue with the selective enforcement program that we do every month. Some of the major streets that we conducted enforcement on were Turn Lane, Taylor Mill Road, East Market Street, Falcon Lane, Green Hill Avenue, Rosary Lane, Westchester Pike, Fern Hill Road, and South Five Points Road. Training for the month. Various officers attended the following training. We continued and finalized the biennial CPR first aid certification for all the officers. It started in June and we continued it and finished in July. Pennsylvania School Safety Institute for SROs. We have Vehicle System Forensics. The FBI LEADA, which is the Law Enforcement Executive Development Association. A few officers attended that this month. The Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association Conference, the Pennsylvania School Resource Officer Conference, Closed Combat Pistol, and the FBI National Conference was attended. One more thing, on a bittersweet note, we continued the college internship at Westchester University this year, and Miss Emily Pachill finished Friday, and it was very successful. She we were asked her to be here tonight, but she waited to take her vacation until this week to finish the program. So it was very successful. We got a very good positive feedback, not only from Emily, but also from the proctor, Dr. Nestor at Westchester University. I meet with her every year. So we hope to continue that for the next years to come. That's all I have.
Do you have an update on the shooting range project at all? Are you aware of the status of the upgraded plan for that?
So it's still in motion. I know there's some. I know Greg Stones was heading that with the Public Works. I don't know exactly when the date is that they're going to start it or continue with it, but yeah, still move forward with it.
According to the minutes from July, they were hoping to start by the end of this month. Still waiting for material to come in.
Okay. Yeah, and that's been the biggest problem, just supply chain too.
Was it the end of July, John, or the end of August?
End of August.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. The alarms, the name alarms, this is an ongoing thing, and this month is 46, last month it was 53, and last year, comparatively speaking, was 56. So we're beginning to see a downward trend here, and we did make an adjustment in the fee schedule for false alarms and all that. Maybe still too early, but do you find this downward trend to be an anomaly, or do you think that this is still on the right track?
Trying to be optimistic about it. Hopefully it's on the right track. I don't know. We need to take a little bit more of a sample base, but we have started tracking. Actually, not that it probably matters if it's an anomaly or not, but we have started tracking the amount of violations per company, just trying to see if there's an issue. And some of these are newer companies, so they're just getting together either with the alarm company or with new employees. A lot of times it is human error, but we'll see. Hopefully as the scale goes on.
Okay. The only other question I had was, I noticed on the West Goshen Township Police Report, monthly activity report, there's one officer had 38 felony arrests. It seems somewhat of a high number in 1 month. Is there one particular incident that occurred that resulted in that number of felony arrests by one officer? Or is that just doing a normal activity? Officer Kevin?
Yes, that was a result of a protracted investigation. There are counts. There'd be 38 counts. It's not there would be 38 people arrested. That was a protracted investigation where it was 38 counts.
Oh, I see. Gotcha. Right.
Any other questions, John?
No, that's it.
Anyone else on the board have a question for Captain Dominguez? Anyone attending have a question? Board, we have also, thank you. Appreciate it, yeah. We also have our monthly Chester County DES, Fellowship Ambulance, Westchester Fire Department, and Goshen Fire reports. Does any of the board have any questions on that information? Very good, then we'll move on to the next item, which is number 12, Board of Supervisors announcements. Start on my left. Tina, do you have any announcements?
Yes, just a few. July 26th, Chaz, the Director of Operations, Good Fellowship for Chester, had sent me an invitation to attend a Zoom on benchmarking, which is a key method for achieving service delivery excellence and learning best practices. It also helps local policymakers learn the questions they should ask to determine the effectiveness of their local EMS system. It's a very good webinar, and that's the benchmarking that Good Fellowship uses. So it's good to get an overview of how they do their benchmarking and how they make a lot of their decisions. Also on August 1st, I attended a community event with the West Goshen Police put together with the Borough, bringing the community together at Henderson, which is very well done every year. Really good job. On August 6th, I went to the summer concert series with Philly Magic. I think there was about 750 people in attendance. It's one of their largest concerts that they have, and it's very well done. To Ken Lear and the Friends of West Goshen did a great job. And then on August 11th, went to a meeting with Good Fellowship to plan for the next 5 to 10 years from a monetary standpoint and what their plans are. That's it.
Thank you, Chief. Falcon, do you have any announcements? Actually. John?
The only thing I have to say is I attended the Goshen Fair on July 31st, Monday through Saturday, August 5th, and it seemed to be very well attended. Certainly can't speak for Goshen Fire Company, but it seemed like everybody had a good time. It's a great event that occurs every year in our community. So what happened?
Thanks, John. I have two announcements. The board met in executive session on July the 19th, August the 9th, and August the 11th to discuss personnel matters, and I attended the Good Fellowship Ambulance local officials meeting with Tina on August the 11th. Township managers announcements, agenda item number 13, Chris.
Mr. Chairman, I only have a few announcements this evening. First is that our August e-newsletter will go out the end of this week. We have expanded our online registration for events, and we are starting for the fall bus schedule, accepting online registration for bus trips. And we actually just got the brochures that are printed up and available at the Township building for the fall. Our park tour that was supposed to be this summer, Ken and I are looking to reschedule that for Thursday, September 7th at 5 p.m. So I will send a calendar invite out to the board. The last event in the Park and Recreation Department Summer Concert Series will be this Sunday, August 20th at 6:30 p.m. in Community Park, and the band is called Whiskey Logic. And then as it relates to our corrugated metal pipe televising, Mark Bertolami, the Streets Department, is actively coordinating that. We're going to start with the property that was discussed on Ashbridge Road, and then we'll be going out to do that tomorrow. September 7th at 5 p.m. I will send a calendar invite to the board about that.
Are they going to that location tomorrow morning or the afternoon?
I believe it's in the morning, but I'll verify it tomorrow morning. Mark's on vacation this week. I'll verify that with Paul. But they're starting on Ashbridge.
What's Paul's last name?
McAvoy.
Thank you, Chris. Do you have any zoning officers announcements?
The only announcements I have, I don't have the actual results of one of the decisions, but the zoning hearing board met on July 24th to hear the application for East High School, and then to render the decision for 1126 Grove Road. They did render a decision denying the variance relief requested for 1126 Grove Road. I have not gotten a copy of the written decision yet, and I will forward that to the board upon receipt. I do not know the results of the hearing for East High School, and I'm waiting for a written copy of the decision.
Is there anything pending before the zoning hearing board?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are no pending applications before the zoning hearing board. There will be no meeting this month.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Chris on either township manager's announcements or zoning officer's announcements? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 15, which is meeting minutes approval for the July 18th meeting. I had one correction in this. Jennifer, you do the minutes for these?
I'm trying.
You're doing great. I just have two typo corrections, I think. One is on page 6. It's the third paragraph that starts with Mr. Walsh, and it's the last sentence. It should be a single audit to be completed depending on how the bills are submitted for the various projects. And then on page 8, under the police report presented by Chief Michael Carroll, the second sentence should end for the first half of 2023. That was it from me. Anybody else have any corrections? Okay, then I'll make the motion to approve the meeting minutes of July 18th with those two corrections. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. Is there any board comments or questions on the motion? Any public comments or questions? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposition? Motion passes 5-0. And then agenda item number 16, which is approval of the Treasurer's Report dated July the 31st for the General Fund, the Sewer Revenue Fund, the Waste and Recycling Fund, and the Capital Reserve Fund, and the bills to be paid from these funds. I'll make the motion to approve the Treasurer's Report and the bills to be paid. Is there a second? Oh, we got a second from Ashley, so we're good. So, any board comments or questions on?
Yes, I have one.
Yeah.
On the bills, I just thought we should change the assistant township manager for one of them. So moving forward, we don't use that terminology anymore.
What's that?
That's one.
It's on the bottom of, I think, the second page for the manual bills list.
And I don't know this.
Okay.
Second page, assistant manager. Township
The
manager.
car got, somebody's car got washed.
That's our monthly, that's just how it is in our capital plan, our fixed assets. We can change that.
Okay.
Okay, and then the other one other thing is on with that same thing moving forward. There's a multi-fax copier lease payment. Is the amount of $636.57. Is that an annual? Is that per year, per month? I'm just wondering, so that's a monthly. That's I want to purchase that copy machine. Copier lease payment.
Chris, maybe you follow up with Chris opinion on that. Just
Yeah.
see what it is. I mean, didn't you mention about the complexity of the audit now with these leases? She was like, next time let's buy a copy or something like that. Yeah.
That's correct.
So.
Under the new
It
GASP
says
requirements.
lease, so.
Yeah, I know, releasing them now, but she was like,
But if you
yeah.
lease it, like, we get service. As soon as it goes bad, it costs money, they're there in 20 minutes.
That is
Versus
one
if
of
you
the-
buy it, then somebody
Yeah.
goes down and fix it.
We had an issue last week that came up pretty quickly.
We should at least look at the cost.
Yeah.
And I would venture to guess that might be, because the bill comes as one for the township, that might just be a portion of a larger bill for the whole complex, for everything under our lease. But I'll check with Christine and follow up.
Because I have one question on page 3, of the invoice list by GL account. ChargePoint Inc., $1,500 cost. You know what that was?
That is our 1-year maintenance contract with them. For all, and that is for all of our charging stations.
For everything at the complex and the one at the park?
Correct. And that's the first time, I believe that's the first time that we've paid that since those have been installed. So this is just to continue the maintenance on them.
Okay.
And the $300 charge that's in there for one of the stations, because from the park, that's just for the usage for one part.
I will verify
Yes,
that with my
return the
CAC,
phone
but I
call.
believe that's
My
correct.
name is John Hellman.
So, wait, so we're billed for the usage of the park?
I'm gonna check on that.
So I thought that was like, but the user account would be billed, not unless we're using it, unless the chief's driving up there and using it.
So it's I will check on all the charge point uses. I know for a fact that $1,500 one is for the warranty and maintenance.
Okay.
But I will check on all the charge point
Thank you.
charges.
Any other questions on the bills? Does anyone attending have any questions on the bills we paid or the treasurer's report? Okay, then we're ready to take a vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion passes 5-0. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
Okay, Tina's made the motion, Ashley, you second.
Everyone says yes.
Okay, all in favor of adjournment say aye. Aye. Thank you, the meeting is adjourned. If the board could stay behind for a couple of minutes.
Have a good night.